it was at that point that I said, well, you know, we could, if we wanted to, extend the concept one step further. I'm not saying that this is ever going to happen, but just conceptually, you could imagine not Fedwire for all, but kind of like a Fedcoin, where what the Fed would do is actually just issue these, Bitcoin-like objects, but and they would enforce a par exchange rate with the U.S. dollar that would eliminate the exchange rate volatility. But they could delegate the clearing of these payments to some third party, some sort of Ripple-like protocol or possibly.
And there you have it.
When the Federal Reserve quietly met with Ripple's leadership, they weren't shopping for cross-border payments at scale. They were eyeing a system that could send XRP toward $25,000. Most people know XRP as the crypto that hangs around fractions of a dollar, or maybe they've heard about Ripple's courtroom battles. But almost no one has seen what happened when Fed officials walked through Ripple's doors in San Francisco last month. What questions did they ask? Were they scouting for a swift alternative? And if that meeting means anything, how high could XRP's price actually climb? Today, we step behind the headlines to uncover why this single meeting may mark a historic turning point, and why $25,000 per token is suddenly in play.
First called this play on Ethereum pretty much at 1845, betting on it going up. This was based off the level strategy. I see these lines, I long or short, and I closed $25,000 in profit. Now, you saw we were trading Ethereum. This is what I've been doing for the past year ever since crypto's been going down, because I can make money when all these coins crash. Majority of the time, I'm just adding to my XRP bags. And a ton of you did the exact same thing as me. This is what I tell you over and over again. This coin has so many moves that just go up and down, and you can make money on all these little pumps and dumps. So many people think I just say sell all your XRP. You don't gotta sell anything. Just learn how to read a chart and figure out how to make money when it goes down. All you really need is these 3 apps, and that's pretty much it. And like I said, when you figure out how to do this, you're pretty much invincible and you can do whatever you want.
When Ripple first sketched its vision, it wasn't just about faster remittances. At Ripple, we're thinking much bigger than cross-border payments. It's like Amazon with rare books in the early days, only this market is a $10 trillion market, one co-founder said in a 2016 podcast. Those words still echo every time XRP processes a settlement. If a token can handle flows that size, its raw potential can't be measured in cents anymore, especially now, after the Fed meeting. Imagine email arriving in seconds instead of days. That was the dream that inspired Ripple's early engineers. They drew parallels between email servers and blockchain nodes. They saw trillions parked in accounts worldwide and asked, what if money could travel that easily? That vision set Ripple on a path through courtrooms, boardrooms, and most recently, a private room at the Federal Reserve. And in each setting, Ripple insisted on building rails strong enough to handle global value.
There is an opportunity to fundamentally rewire how modern economic or modern financial infrastructure works in the pre-funding. You have about $10 trillion pre-funded at banks around the world in order to enable cross-border payments. If you could take advantage of crypto liquidity to fund real-time payments, you can actually take that $10 trillion and use it for other purposes, which is great for society. It's great for banking. It's great for industry. So that's what we're trying to rewire. We're lucky to now have about 200 banks that have signed up, but we've got a long way to go.
I know Arbor, Ripple, Circle, a few, right. These are some of your investments that you've made. What do you think about when you're thinking about investing?
So what I'm looking for are companies that can take the price of transacting down by that same 90-some%. That's how I get to it. I think that I've tried to find that for a long time. I think the digital currency solution is the first thing I've looked at and said we have the potential to do that.
Behind the scenes, Ripple quietly built partnerships with central banks, regulators, and licensed institutions. It wasn't a race to list XRP on every exchange. It was about constructing rails capable of carrying global value. XRP wasn't being suppressed. It was being engineered quietly, strategically, globally, one insider recalls. That deliberate pace kept price action tame, but it also ensured that every node, every compliance check, and every regulator tick-off was signed, sealed, and audited. The backbone of that effort is the XRP ledger, a blockchain built for speed and finality. Unlike other networks where transactions can take minutes or even hours, XRP settles in about 4 seconds. That speed matters when you're talking about trillions moving between banks. Think about it. If a payment takes days, every hour slows global trade. Ripple's ledger changes that math. And when the Fed showed interest, they recognized the power of near-instant settlement.
All right, crypto fam, let's dive into 3 game-changing XRP partnerships that are about to flip the financial world on its head. First up, we've got Ripple teaming up with Bank of America. This powerhouse duo is revolutionizing cross-border payments, making them lightning fast and dirt cheap. Next, brace yourselves for the Ripple SBI Holdings Alliance. They're bringing blockchain to Asia's financial markets, and it's going to be epic. But wait, there's more. Ripple's partnership with CME. They're transforming how we send money globally, making it as easy as sending a text. These collaborations aren't just changing the game, they're creating a whole new playing field. The future of finance is here, and it's powered by XRP. Are you ready for this financial?
Surviving legal scrutiny was another step. Ripple spent more on court fees than almost any other digital asset firm, over $200 million, according to filings. When the dust settled, the XRP ledger had been audited by multiple governments, and banks had tested it in pilot programs. Those aren't bullet points on a slide deck. They're battles won in federal courtrooms and global policy meetings. That fortress of credibility laid the groundwork for this Fed engagement. Then came the Fed meeting. Sources say Fed officials sat across from Ripple's top team and asked about interoperability of economies, the ability to connect more than 200 countries' payment and securities infrastructures. They talked about creating a level playing field between old guard banks and new digital rails. When the Fed seeks that conversation, it's no longer a fringe idea, it's a national agenda. Could Ripple replace SWIFT? That question has floated around for years. SWIFT moves an estimated $150 trillion every year, but settles payments in 2 to 5 days and charges hefty fees. Ripple's on-demand liquidity rails settle in seconds, with fees that vanish compared to SWIFT's. With the Fed now in dialogue, those theoretical gains inch closer to reality, and if even 10% of SWIFT's volume shifts over, XRP's price math suddenly looks eye-watering.
After acquisition of Hidden Road, doesn't that indicate Ripple is becoming SWIFT 2.0? Yeah, they literally could circumvent SWIFT utilizing Hidden Road to be able to settle transactions using that clearinghouse to do that between the counterparties that currently work with them. And I think that's kind of the point. I think that they're like pushing the line, getting as close to that as they can for really kind of forcing SWIFT's hand to adopt this technology. And again, I think they're being progressive. You've seen partnerships with Hedera and Chainlink. It's not what they're going to use to settle. Yes, I think this is a shot across the bow from Ripple at SWIFT, letting them know, if you guys aren't going to do it, we are. I don't think they're ever going to overtake SWIFT. I think they're just going to force SWIFT.
Let's break down the numbers. SWIFT's $150 trillion annual flow, if 10% moves to Ripple, equals $15 trillion. With a capped supply of around 100 billion XRP tokens, that level of use could push each token into 5-figure territory. Add mainstream institutions locking XRP into ETFs and DeFi protocols, adding scarcity on top of utility, and $25,000 per token stops looking like a fantasy. Institutional voices have noticed. Ripple's a company of really professional people working really hard on this. That's why we chose XRP, says Salad Gilbert, a fund manager with decades in regulated markets. We believe in XRP. Bitcoin is a store of value. XRP has a true use case. That kind of endorsement from insiders who move millions means the narrative is shifting from speculative chatter to real-world adoption. And when they heard the Fed was listening, they started adjusting their models accordingly. Yet price action has barely budged. Right now, XRP sits at just over 20 cents. Traders joke about waiting for a 50-cent dip, but those bargains won't matter when a Fed-backed system is humming. Discounts in the single digits vanish against the prospect of $5, $10, $20, or more. If this truly is the moment when regulators tip their hand, every cent of suppressed price becomes the foundation for something much larger.
And you're familiar with SWIFT, probably. But the settlement is done separately through the bookkeeping operations along the chain of financial intermediaries. But if we have the unified ledger that have both central bank money and commercial bank deposits all on the same platform, we can have all of those transactions take place instantaneously at the same time.
Global remittances alone move more than $700 billion annually, with average fees around 6–8%. Ripple's pilots have shown that cost can fall to as little as 1%. Shave off fees, slash settlement times, and you free up tens of billions for entrepreneurs, families, and businesses. When the Fed inquired about those savings, you could almost hear the gears turning towards systemic change. Consider emerging market corridors beyond Asia and Europe. In Latin America, pilots between Brazil and Mexico cut settlement from 48 hours to 10 seconds. In Africa, Nigeria-South Africa corridors once plagued by volatility now sail smoothly on XRP rails. Those successes convinced local regulators to explore broader use, and when the Fed compared notes, it underscored that Ripple's network can thrive even where traditional rails fall short. Beyond bank-to-bank rails, Ripple's technology is finding new life in tokenized assets. Corporate bond issuances settled in XRP, art-backed tokens moving on the ledger, and real estate transfers speeding through smart contracts. Each new use case deepens demand and tightens token supply, another arrow aimed at that elusive $25,000 mark. When regulators asked how many bonds had already flowed through the ledger, Ripple's team rattled off figures that made Wall Street sit up.
The XRP community has dealt with nothing but crap thrown at them. Whether that be from regulators, whether that be from other crypto communities. However, when you understand what Ripple and thus XRP are trying to do, it is address a genuine use case for distributed ledgers in the form of the remittance markets globally, which are very clunky, and XRP can entirely transform and innovate.
On the digital asset front, state-run CBDC trials are using Ripple's Interledger protocol. The Bank of Japan tested tokenized securities, and the European Central Bank explored retail CBDC prototypes on XRP rails. Now, whispers say the Fed's FedNow system may run interoperability modules built by Ripple. When those pilots multiply, mainstream institutions won't just whisper, they'll flood the market, driving real price discovery. We've seen a mid-tier regional bank in Southeast Asia go live on on-demand liquidity, cutting FX hedging costs by 40%. They cited unprecedented transparency and instant settlement in their investor reports. If hundreds of regional banks follow suit, that's hundreds of millions in new demand for XRP each quarter. And when the Fed asked about that network effect, Ripple's team had projections that made economists smile. All eyes are on the upcoming G20 summit, where central bank governors will share their digital finance roadmaps. Sources say Ripple's head of policy has a spot on the agenda, framing XRP as the core engine of a new financial era.
In our modern world, technology moves at light speed. But why has our financial infrastructure failed to keep up with the pace of change? The Interledger protocol was created to make sending money across the internet easy. We envisioned a payments network that acts as a bridge between anyone and the entire world. Today, when we send an email, we take it for granted that once we hit send, the email will appear in the recipient's inbox almost instantly. It doesn't matter if you're sending from one email provider to another. It works seamlessly in a matter of seconds, not days. The Interledger protocol is designed so you can send money as easily as you can send an email. It's a network that reflects our interconnected world, accessible to all, regardless of identity, geography, or income. One that's more inclusive, without minimum transaction amounts or costly transfer fees. The closed networks of the past keep people disconnected. Our mission is to bring our financial infrastructure into the 21st century and give everyone equal access.
Beyond token rails, XRP's tokenomics are a story in themselves. Created with a maximum supply of 100 billion tokens, Ripple initially held about 55 billion as corporate reserves. To avoid flooding the market, those tokens were locked into escrows, releasing only 1 billion XRP per month on a predictable schedule. Any unused tokens automatically return to escrow, ensuring supply doesn't suddenly spike. Meanwhile, each transaction on the XRP ledger burns a tiny amount of XRP, making the network inherently deflationary. That deflationary mechanism means every settled payment chips away at the supply, slowly increasing scarcity. Transaction costs average fractions of a cent, a feature that makes micropayments not just possible. When regulators quizzed Ripple about these use cases, they saw not just an interbank tool, but a platform for a digital economy. Development on the XRP ledger spans dozens of sectors. From gaming platforms tokenizing in-game assets to supply chain firms tracking goods, over 150 companies have built on the network. XRPL Labs maintains code, Coil integrates streaming payments for creators, and Forte explores tokenized game economies. Each application creates additional demand for XRP, as developers and users need tokens to interact with the ledger's smart contracts and hooks.
When XRP was created, it was actually pre-mined. So it was a predetermined number of coins that they were going to put out and not create anymore. It's actually 100 billion XRP tokens. When these 100 billion XRP tokens were created, 80 billion went to Ripple Labs themselves, and the remainder 20 billion went to their other founders. Ripple Labs actually distributes that 80 billion XRP at predetermined times over time to the public. And XRP currently has a circulating supply of 47 billion.
Decentralization has been a pillar from the start. The XRP ledger runs on a consensus protocol with more than 200 validators globally. Approximately 65% of those are independent entities, from universities to tech companies, while the remainder are operated by Ripple and its partners. That mix of validators ensures decisions aren't controlled by a single entity and reinforces the ledger's integrity, a point that impressed Fed auditors looking for secure, sovereign-grade infrastructure. The Federal Reserve delegation included officials from the Fed's Payment Studies Group and the Bank for International Settlements Liaison's office. They asked detailed questions about KYC, AML, and how identity layers could integrate with XRP's rails. Ripple showcased its on-ledger compliance tools and partnerships with identity providers that allow banks to satisfy global regulations without sacrificing transaction speed. For the Fed, that combination of speed and compliance made XRP stand out. While the world watches central bank digital currencies, Ripple is positioning XRP as the bridge between legacy money and tokenized cash. Pilots in the Bank of Japan and the European Central Bank tested the interledger protocol for CBDC transfers, promising seamless value exchange across different blockchains. When the Fed inquired about similar experiments for the digital dollar, Ripple's team shared mock-ups showing how FedNow could interoperate with tokenized reserves via XRP rails.
So the concern with centralization is whether there's one party that gets to determine what the rules are, that calls the shots, that can stop the system, that controls it, that can change the systems in ways that harm its users. The software is all open. Anyone can run a server, anyone can run a validator, and they do. Exchanges are stakeholders, people who hold XRP and run a server to process their own transactions. They're all stakeholders in the system, and if Ripple were to disappear, nothing would prevent them from continuing to operate the system exactly the way it operates today. A lot of people are concerned that Ripple might be able to create more XRP, but the protocol doesn't have any way to say, hey, I got a whole bunch of XRP, just don't ask me where it came from. The transaction rules are deterministic, the software is open source, there is no way to create XRP. Ripple currently holds about 60 billion XRP. That's 60% of all the XRP that will ever exist. 55 billion XRP have been locked in escrow to release over 55 months, $1 billion a month. And Ripple's done that to provide some level of supply predictability to ensure that we'll be holding our XRP over a period of time. Any XRP that we don't use in a month, just because 1 billion XRP releases every month doesn't mean that we'll use it.
Market conditions may also soon tilt in XRP's favor. The Federal Reserve has signaled possible rate cuts by mid-2025. Lower rates historically ignite risk assets, from equities to crypto. As capital flows search for yield, a transparent, fast, and regulated network like XRP's could draw corporate treasuries and institutional investors. If volume spikes and adoption accelerates, that's the kind of environment where ambitious price targets don't remain academic. At the center sits Brad Garlinghouse, Ripple's CEO, a former tech executive who once led consumer products at Yahoo and AOL. He and co-founder Chris Larson have navigated lawsuits, regulatory landmines, and market skepticism to reach this moment. When Fed officials saw those personalities and heard their pitch, they realized XRP isn't just code. It's a vision for the future of money that could echo email's impact on communication.
All right, so here are the 2 reasons why we need to talk about the Federal Reserve buying back our XRP. Let's get into this. So Ripple stated in 2017 that they had a simple goal of making XRP a world reserve currency. And then their next goal was to make it as liquid as a G10 currency. So to compare it to other currencies like the United States dollar that has that reserve currency status, and then you have other G10 currencies like the euro, Swiss franc, that provide liquidity in markets across the world, this is what XRP is ready to accomplish. It's ready to handle Swift's daily volume of $5 trillion. It's ready to handle the derivatives market that's in the hundreds of trillions of dollars. So while Ripple and XRP are solving problems valued in the trillions of dollars, the rest of the cryptocurrency space is really just playing around. Now, I don't believe in the buyback, but I do believe that if they were to do a buyback, it would solve the debt crisis, liquidity crisis, and the energy crisis.
If you found this video insightful, smash that like button and subscribe for more videos on crypto's biggest stories. Don't forget to ring the bell so you'll be first in line when our next episode drops. Drop a comment below with your take. Will XRP really hit $25,000? We read every word and can't wait to hear your thoughts. See you in the next one.